Hello instructors, here is our Sprint 3 project, Bias in Data Availability Study in Healthcare. The main language you will be using in this project will be Python.
Okay, for our data source, firstly, I'm gonna talk about the gap between the HIPAA and the EHR. So we know PHI regarding to the protect health information of the patient. So we cannot get the real, it's really hard to get the real electronic health record from the available data source. So we have two solutions. First one is to generate the synthetic electronic health record using the generative adversarial network. And the second option we can use it to use the open source database. It's called the Mimic 3. Um, so for the option one, we propose to generate the synthetic electronic health record that is available and suitable for our research and free of legal privacy and security issues. We have two methods. So they all use the generative adversarial network to generate the synthetic electronic health record. For the We can open the first one. It's from research paper. We can replicate their work and to generate the suitable electronic health record. And also some synthetic patient can be simulated with a prediction model like disease prediction. We can identify the corresponding ratio or gender bias. And the option two, which is use the Mimic database, it's open source and developed by the MIT lab. So we can use that. Uh, we can also use that to find the gender or racial bias in our research project. So after complete the training course, we all can get access to the Mimic 3. Here is the link we need to request from uh, we, we, we need to request the access to the Mimic 3.
We will be using Plotly's Dash framework to show results from AIX360 to locate and narrow down bias that is persistent in the dataset. Although a Dash dashboard may take more time to build than a dashboard in Tableau or other platforms, Dash seems to be more powerful. Dash is highly interactive, which gives us the ability to visualize data patterns much more quickly than other methods. Dash is an open source library and is particularly suited for anyone who works with data in Python, so it will work seamlessly with our AIX360 framework. Dash should help us clean up the dataset by quickly identifying certain data attributes that lead to bias and help us eliminate data attributes that don't help in finding bias. Dash will enable us to interact with the dataset and compare with the data produced from AIX360 to discover patterns that would have been missed otherwise. Once the dataset is refined, we will finally use Dash to help show the overall racial and gender bias in healthcare that we discovered, and this will be presented as a dashboard in the final deliverable.
One of the ways to avoid bias in the healthcare data is by preparing guidelines that can be used during the data collection process. So for this, we will study different types of data like qualitative data versus quantitative data, which type of data is more prone to bias, and what are some of the common bias and ways to avoid them. Similarly, we'll also study certain data collection methodology like survey questionnaires, observations, physical interviews, etc. At the end, we will aim to develop certain guidelines that can be used by the designers of these data collection process in order to form a better survey question, or in order to, for example, in case of physical interviews, in order to select a better better sample of people that can represent a real world, so that the data that is gathered at the end of this process closely represents the real world. In previous slide, we saw how we can improve the process of data collection so that the healthcare data generated is of good quality. In this slide, we will see for an existing healthcare data that already has a bias in it, how we can detect it and improve the data. So we will use a tool called AI Fairness 360. This tool allows us to detect a bias in an existing data, and it also has a lot of debiasing algorithms that we can use to remove the bias in an existing data and before it is fed to the model.
Hi, this is Henry. So for flowchart, that here you can see that we are because we're a research project, so we're going to focus on like the data flow for this project. More specifically, that first like we use like the EHR, want to use EHR data and use a pre-trained GAN model and to find a synthetic model. By doing that, we're assuming that the model is learning the data representation from our EHR data, so we can have a model assumption about like this model is pretty well, and then it's pretty much learning what the actual data is. And after that, we will do some exploratory analysis on the data that we generated. So our hypothesis is like because like if there are bias in the data, then our model may have bias um, in generating like this kind of syntax data. So therefore, we're going to define some hypothesis in our syntax data to identify it. So for example, like we want to like look at whether this data set is more biased toward to different gender or different races. And we will implement like AIX360, which is an IBM built package to debias those problems. And finally, we will visualize our results through the Dash app and propose like some next steps that to help us to better collect data for the future need.
This is our Gantt chart. As you can see, it is highlighted at today's date, October 4th, and we have completed this sprint, which is the technical research presentation. We went over a high-level overview of how we will complete this project. So that concludes this sprint. So next sprint, we are going to be working more on the research study development. So we've already started on that. We're about 15% complete with that. And the end date for that is October 18th. So we will work towards that. We are all on track for completion on December 9th. There are no concerns at this time.